Good afternoon. I call to order the Lynchburg Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, April 11, 2018. Thank you all for coming. The first order of business is the approval of the March 14, 2018 minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Motion to approve? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Thank you, Robin, for putting all those together. The next order of business is the following public hearing item. Petition of Jeffrey Carrico for a conditional use permit at 127 Tomahawk Industrial Park to allow the operation of a recreational sports facility in an I-2 light industrial district.
Members of the Planning Commission, this is a pretty simple petition. The property is currently zoned I-2 light industrial. It does allow the approval of sports complexes, those types of uses upon approval of conditional use permit. There'd be no changes to the exterior of the property. The petitioner wishes to use the center portion of the existing building for hitting and the batting practice of softballs and baseballs.
Thank you. Is there someone here to speak on behalf of this petition? Mr. Carrico, come on in. Sign in, please. Tell us your name, and we'd be happy to hear any additional comments.
My name is Jeff Carrico, or Jeffrey Carrico. I've coached and played in the city ever since we moved here back in college, which is about 22 years ago. As my son grew up, coached him all the way up, and whenever it rained, there was no place to go. Some places have opened up spotty here and there, and I was trying to find something that was a little bit more stable, and I was actually able to find this property, and the gentleman he's excited to have something like that because for me it's all about the youth. It's all about the kids and having them have a place to come and to work and to stay out of trouble and really be able to refine their crafts and what they want to do. So I actually have some letters of support because the people had to work and they could not be here. I also have some pictures I wanted to show you guys about what I've done, what it used to look like, what it's going to look like, and things on those lines. So let's see, let me finish this. Let's see. Do I need to give these to anybody? Or?
You can pass them over to the commissioners, and then we'll add them to the record after we've glanced at them.
Awesome, thank you.
And then you can either do the same with the pictures, or you can leave them on the table, and we should be able to get a camera picture. I'm just kind of center them underneath that lens above your head.
Yeah, I actually have my toner started running low, so I wasn't able to print out the before pictures. It was also, I didn't even make a phone call because I wasn't open yet and I didn't want to tell anybody, but it's actually also in the newspaper. They did a nice little article about it, and people have been excited as far as I can tell. And so, not half as excited as me though, but yeah. Where should I put these?
Right underneath that camera sticking down from the ceiling.
All right, let's see if I can. Let's see.
Yep. There you go.
It was an old industrial building that was just stored and warehoused, and I was actually able to turn it into a indoor facility that kids can come to with some cages and pitching lanes set up. The building is absolutely perfect for it. I even actually added a golf simulator to where people can play around the golf. If it's raining outside and it's their day off and they can't get to the golf course, they can come play around the golf. It's got over 900 courses on it. You can play Torrey Pines, Pebble, all those fun stuff. But it's been a lot of hard work, so I hope you guys can find favor.
All right. We may have some questions for you in a moment. I think you
Absolutely.
can probably just stay right there for now. Is there anyone from the public here to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone opposed? All right. Public hearing is closed. Sorry.
In the back.
Okay, Mr. Carrico, if you could just step back and let this gentleman come up, please, then.
Thank you, Madam, gentlemen. My name is Carl Manfield. I live in the second house down from the subject property on Rookmont. We have lived there now 35 years.
No, we're talking about the sand lot, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, okay.
So stay tuned. We'll get you back up here in a few minutes. All right?
For the record, I approve. I like it.
Good man.
All right.
He's my new favorite person.
All right. So at this point, the public hearing is closed, and we'll give Mr. Carrico's heart a chance to calm down. And, any questions or comments from the commissioners?
So have you already done these changes to the building?
Yeah, I didn't change any of the building. I just put down some carpet and painted and did those types of things to the building. Everything I have is completely movable, and all the nets can slide in and out to create space or to alleviate space. So it's I haven't had to make any changes. It's just been a little bit of elbow grease to where if I can get approval, I'll be able to open sooner rather than later.
Other comments?
I think it's a great thing. My children went through sort of the same situation that you described, which is rainy days. There was a limited amount of places to go and practice ball or things of that nature. And I get down that road from time to time. I drove by there just in anticipation of this, and I'm happy to see the space being utilized. Good luck. My son, when he comes to town the next time, I'll bet you he'll say, can we go over there and try it out?
Go on.
I'd like to echo Commissioner Light's comments. I went down there and looked at the building from the outside. I think it's a great use of the building, doing something positive, and especially when we're doing something positive for the youth of the city on rainy days. All for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I visited, I actually ran into Mr. Carrico and was invited inside and was given the tour and took a swing on the golf simulator and discovered I need to take a lot more swings on golf simulators. But I'm a big fan of, as most people know, of reusing vacant buildings, and I think this is a great use and it fits into that area fine. So I'm fully in support of it. Other comments? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve as presented.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We are recommending approval. Thank you very much. Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
As we move forward, a couple of reminders with these petitions that Planning Commission is only making recommendations. The City Council makes the final decision. So you guys get to repeat this again in front of Council. And we do have a set of rules and time limits that we'll be enforcing. Robin will be having a timer showing us where people stand. We do this to allow everyone fair opportunity to speak, and we do anticipate allowing everyone the chance to express their views. So the second item is the petition of Shelton and Haley Holding Company, LLC, to amend the future land use map from low-density residential to community commercial and to rezone approximately 1 3/500 acres from R2 low-medium density residential district to B3 community business district at 5001, 5005, 5013, and 5051 Fort Avenue to allow the continued operation and expansion of appliance sales and service. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This property is the Ed Hawkins Appliance Store, which has been at this location for approximately, or I think over 40 years. The property is currently designated as low-density residential on the city's future land use map, or FLUME, despite its longtime commercial usage. Low-density residential areas are characterized by single-family detached housing and some public or institutional uses when appropriate. This petition proposes to amend the FLUME to community commercial to bring the existing appliance store into compliance. Community commercial areas often contain retail, personal service, entertainment, and restaurant uses that draw customers from at least several neighborhoods, the city, or the entire region. Community commercial areas contain clusters of businesses, often at major intersections and shopping centers. The property is zoned R2, low to medium density residential, in accordance with the current FLUME designation, which does not permit retail sales. The proposed B3 Community Business District would align with the proposed FLUME and allow the business to continue operating and expand its current use. In summary, the current FLUME designation and zoning did not reflect how this block of Ford Avenue has developed over time and how it continues to function today. If the FLUME amendment and rezoning are approved, the concept plan shows a small parking lot expansion, the demolition of one of the shed buildings, and the removal of a gravel area. The plan also shows the closure of several curb cuts, which is beneficial to this intersection of Ford Avenue. The Planning Division recommends approval of both the rezoning and the FLUME amendment.
Thank you. Who is here to speak on behalf of this petition?
My name is Amy Sipe. I'm a civil engineer with AccuPoint Surveying and Design, and with me is Mitch Haley, the owner of Alta Vista Appliance and contract purchaser of this property. As you see, and as Rachel has presented, this is almost a Lynchburg icon, Ed Hawkins. I personally was a little bit nervous when I thought that maybe this was changing from something else, but we will all still be able to go to the store and get our appliance parts and repairs. It will be basically the identical use, but be getting a facelift. This property is in a redevelopment area, so I'm glad to see that we are taking this property and bringing it into the 21st century and just giving it a good facelift and updating the property, and I think it'll be a great viable business for this area.
Great, thank you. I think you could probably stay up here as well. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak in favor of this petition? Yes, sir. If you want to come on up. Okay, we will swap out the. Okay, just go ahead and sign in, please, and you can just stand in front of the mic so we.
I'm Rick Reed. I'm with Co-op Commercial Reading Company, and I'm here on behalf of the family that owns the store now. And just want to say how pleased we are to find somebody who's going to continue the same type of operation that's in there now, and hope they continue to be extremely successful. So that's all I got to say. I just wanted to let you know the family was excited.
Great.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. Comments or questions?
On a personal note, will y'all still be making house calls?
Oh, yeah.
Airborne.
I have a technical question. Is this being done because it has to be done? I'm all for it being changing the FLUME because it just seems common sense that should be commercial. But why are you doing this? Because you're making external changes to the building?
Right. Currently, the appliance store is considered a non-conforming use, even though the appliance store may have been there before the zoning ordinance. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly the timeline on that. But because they want to expand the parking lot, yes, they need to come into compliance with the zoning ordinance.
I was curious. I noticed some food trucks parked in the back. Is that, or do you use that lot for storage, or?
Okay, so Ed Hawkins now lets the neighbors behind the building there park their food trucks. I've talked to the neighbors and I told them that they're more than welcome to put their food trucks there still. They just use it as storage. I don't think they actually do a business out of that parking lot for their food trucks.
Any other questions, comments? Do we have a motion? Let's hang on one sec. Yeah, so we can either do them separately, or Rachel, we can make a motion to vote on just one.
If that's how you want to do
change. I think it makes sense to approve or not approve both of them, but it's certainly okay if we wanted to vote on them separately. Okay. Let's continue with your motion then.
And I move that we approve based on the recommended motion as presented.
And that's
Second?
for zoning and for flume, to be
Sure.
clear. Okay.
And we have a second, so we are voting on both of them together, the rezoning and the change in the flume. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. Our next public hearing item, or business, is our next order of business is the public hearing item, petition of Willoughby Properties to amend the future land use map from institutional to traditional residential and to rezone approximately 1 and 5,500 acres from R3, medium density residential district, to R4, high density residential district at 2001 Rivermont Avenue and 211 Hawes Street to allow the conversion of the existing buildings into apartments with associated parking.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission, before we get started, Lauren Fishbein, who is a graduating senior at Lynchburg College. She interned for us. We've been fortunate enough to have her working with us part-time. She'll be leaving us in May, going on to bigger and better things in Richmond Grad School. She wanted the experience of presenting to a public body, and I think she's going to get it. She'll be doing the presentation this afternoon.
Great, thank you. Go right ahead.
All right. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Mr. Chair and the Planning Commission. The property at 2001 Rivermont Avenue and 211 Hawes Drive dates back to 1909 with more modern development in the 1950s. In the past, it's been used institutionally while being owned by both the Seven Hills School, that was purchased in 1959, and the former Virginia School of the Arts, which was purchased in 1995. However, today the property is vacant and in poor condition with broken windows and doors. The current owner purchased the property in December 2017 and intends to renovate the vacant building and convert it into 22 apartments with the associated parking. R3, the property's current zoning, worked fine when the property was functioning as a school. However, now that the property is vacant and desired to be utilized, it's important to note that R3 does not permit the construction of apartment homes, thus rezoning the property to R4, high-density residential. R4 zoning is permitted in traditional residential areas and has already been granted to a number of properties on Rivermont Avenue to accommodate multifamily apartment complexes. Can you do the future use map, please? The comprehensive plan recommends institutional usage on the future land use map. However, it appears to be a remnant from the 1959 to 2011 when the property served as a school. It has not been utilized for institutional use for 7 years. The proposed future land use map edit would return the property to traditional residential use, which would be more in character to the properties within vicinity. The planning staff recommends this edit to the future land use map, for it allows for the restoration of an existing historic property on Rivermont Avenue while maintaining the current residential use. The property is bounded by Hawes Street, Vermont Avenue, and London Street, all single-family homes. If the petition is approved, the existing parking lot will be reconstructed and will have one entrance opposed to two entrances. Opposed to two entrances on Hawes. Thank you. The developer has exceeded the requirements for parking, providing 22 off-street spots and 8 on-street spots, which exceeds the 22 minimum requirement. They are also planning on buffering the parking lot by a generous band of greenery. Additional trees will be planted along Hawes Street and Rivermont Avenue in the parking lot. The asphalt drive near the Tudor House will be the new focus of the property, trying to maintain that historic feel of the property, so they will allow public space and get rid of the asphalt drive. In regards to traffic, the city's transportation engineer had no comments or concerns for the property to not meet the threshold necessary for a traffic study. It is also well connected through public transportation. Erosion and sediment control. Water quality would be addressed through the purchase of off-site nutrient credits, and water quantity will be addressed through underground detention. The Planning Division recommends approval for this petition of Willoughby Properties to rezone 2001 Rivermont Avenue and 211 Hawes Street from R3 medium density to R4 to high density. The Planning Division also recommends the amendment of the future land use map from institutional use to traditional residential use. This petition will bring a vacant, blighted property in the local historic district to a new adaptive use that coincides with adjacent properties. We support the R4 zoning specifically, for there's a specific need for multifamily housing, and Rivermont Avenue is a highly desired location within the city. So thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Who is here to speak on behalf of this petition?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anna Chitla, the owner of Willoughby Properties. I don't need to repeat why we're here today. I think the introduction was very nice, and I really appreciate the thorough summary, so my remarks will be brief. I suspect that everyone in this room knows this property. The original house is one of the best examples of Tudor Revival architecture in Lynchburg, and certainly in the Rivermont Historic District. And the 1950s part, I think, is quite interesting as well. It's not historical yet, but I have no doubt that it will be appreciated as a fine example of mid-century modern style. Down the line, if not already, that style is becoming quite fashionable. So it's important to preserve the entire building as part of the city's historical and cultural heritage. Unfortunately, the building has been vacant for quite some time and not well taken care of since 2011, and that has taken its toll. It's really in poor repair. The roof is leaking. The front portico, which is beautiful and very stately, is unstable at this point, and I worry that it's not going to fare well through the spring rain season. The interior is uninhabitable, so the building doesn't have much time. I think a couple of more seasons of exposure to the elements, and we are going to lose very beautiful architectural features. So our plan is to move really quickly, stabilize the building, and begin construction this summer if our rezoning request goes through. And we would like to finish by the summer of 2019. As was mentioned, we are planning on developing this into 22 apartments. We considered other options for this site, some sort of commercial space or institutional mixed use. We also thought about breaking off the Tudor house and converting it into a residence and using the 1950s part for some sort of commercial activity or multifamily units, but those options are really not viable. Some just don't work financially, and others, I think, will be quite out of character for the neighborhood. So after consulting with architects and real estate experts here in Lynchburg, we thought that a multifamily development really makes most sense for this site. In our view, the change in zoning and future land use should be recommended by the Planning Commission because it is quite consistent with the principles articulated in the city's 2030 comprehensive plan and the future land use map, which I learned is referred to as the FLUM. Let me make a few quick points on these principles and why we think this project meets them. I think first and foremost, the proposed development is quite compatible with the neighborhood. Right now, the property is tagged as institutional use, and that's really a holdover from the time that this was a school. So going back to residential, traditional residential uses is reverting to the original character of the property, and it's very much in line with the surrounding homes in the area. Most lots, we've looked at the map, are designated traditional residential already, and as all of you probably know, R4 zoning is certainly allowed in traditional residential district. And multifamily apartments are not unusual. There are many of them actually along Vermont Avenue, so this one is not going to stick out and will be very much in character. Second, I noticed that the comprehensive plan favors adaptive use of historic buildings, and this is very much in line with that. An important historical asset will be preserved in the city, and the building will contribute to the stability of the neighborhood and undoubtedly will improve property values in the area. Third, I want to say a few words about the design and construction. You know, I bought this building, I've looked at many, but I bought this one because I really like it. So I have a personal interest in doing a good job on the renovation. We are going to comply with the U.S. Department of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic buildings. The units will be 1 and 2 bedroom. They will all have very nice kitchen with granite countertops, washer and dryers within the units. We are the rent is going to be at market. Some units will be quite nice, especially in the old house, because we really don't want to disturb the flow of the house and the architectural elements. So the apartments will be beautiful in the old building and larger and more expensive. In the gym, we're hoping to really take advantage of the nice height and put in very airy lofts. So those will be more medium priced. So I think this is going to attract very nice tenants that will contribute to the neighborhood. My fourth point is, unfortunately, this is a beautiful neighborhood, but this building is very unattractive. It's an eyesore. It attracts vagrants. Since I've owned it since December, every time I go there, someone was breaking in. So I've boarded up all the windows and secured everything so we wouldn't have any of that happening. So all of that will be fixed, and I think most people in the neighborhood will be quite happy. Just a few quick words about landscaping, because I know a couple of neighbors emailed me about it. We will have it professionally landscaped. There will be green areas, especially to camouflage the parking lots, so it will not be visible from Rivermont and Hawes. We are going to try to preserve all the mature trees to the extent possible. We'll create 2 communal green spaces for residents' enjoyment, sort of with, decorative planting and sitting areas. What else? Let me say a few words about parking, because I know that's of interest to many people here in the room. we've repositioned the parking lot somewhat to maximize the parking spaces. So we do have 22 spaces in the back of the building. 2 of them will be handicap accessible. We're also going to build handicap accessible ramps in the back of the building into the rear entrances. I'm not going to dwell on utilities, stormwater management. I will leave that. That's part of our applications, and if anyone has any questions, I think our civil engineer will be happy to answer them. Just a quick word about the HPC. We submitted the preliminary site plan and asked for their approval of the parking lot lighting and the trash enclosure, and they provided us with a certificate of appropriateness. So I think that basically covers my points, and let me just quickly summarize that we think that this is the kind of development that the comprehensive plan and the FLUM envisions. It certainly makes sense for this kind of a neighborhood. It very much matches the houses that are already there. It's a solid project. It will be completed quickly, and it will be well done. And the city and the Rivermont Historic District will certainly benefit from it. So we hope that you will look at this application favorably and that eventually the City Council will approve our rezoning request. That's all I have. Let me just say that with me I have Casey Service, who is the architect and historical consultant for the project, and Bill Berkeley, who is the civil engineer working on the site plans. We will be glad to take any of your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We may be calling you back in a bit. You can go ahead and return to your seats for now. As we start the public input part of this meeting, Ms. Shitla mentioned rents, so I think it's appropriate to remind folks, because this often comes up with these types of petitions, that we are not allowed to consider any concerns about low-income tenants by law. So anyone here in favor of this petition from the public who wishes to speak? Yes, ma'am. Come on forward. Sign in, please, and state your name.
My name is Aline Bowles, ALINEBOWLES. I'm one of the few people probably ever in the city to go to all 3 schools that are on Rivermont Avenue. Anybody else here? I went to the Villa, I went to Garland Roads, and I went to Seven Hills School. I'm really a terrible person about zoning, but I know Anna. I met Anna and Jeff last year, the latter part of the year, and they were curious about properties, and Anna liked Seven Hills, and she purchased it. I have talked with Anna about this project, and I've come to realize that she has in her European DNA a care. It's a less is more approach, and the less harsh impact, the better. So I think that's really, she and I have a lot in common that way. She has the best interests of the community and the neighborhood and the project at heart. So I'm impressed by that because, as I said, I have those similar feelings. And not to mention the impact on my grandparents' home next door at 2021. So if not Anna, who? This house really is in very bad shape, and not much more time can pass before it may have to be torn down. Anna will maintain the integrity of as many of the architectural points on the inside of the house as possible, and I'm sure she will do an excellent and sensitive job rehabilitating this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in favor of this petition? Yes, sir. Come on forward, please.
I'm the owner of 1917 Rivermont Avenue, which is 2 doors down. I have 2 children of 10 children, which live within those 4 houses. And that area has always been a sore spot for us as family members. My son and his friend, 4 weeks ago, came to me and showed me a key they found, and it was drug paraphernalia. There's a bamboo forest over there that they enjoy going to, but we don't allow them to go because of the safety issues. So I welcome something like this. I think it would be good for the neighborhood. I think it would be safe for our children, and I think they would be excited as well. So thank you.
Could you just also state your name verbally?
I'm sorry, Brian Myers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Others in favor? Yes, sir.
Are you allowed to be more in favor than not in favor?
That's fine.
My wife and I live at 2236 Rivermont, which is right at the entrance to the park, and we've been watching the development of the old school, which you had a hearing about, and we came and talked with you at that time about that, because they were putting in around 30 apartments.
Speaking about Garland Road, correct?
Yes. And so that has, that there was a big delay on that, and we never did quite learn exactly why there was such a delay, but we're pleased that they've started working on that again. Our biggest concern with that project was that they didn't have enough parking spaces. And so they did a little remodifying in order to add some additional parking spaces around that facility, but they were still going to have people parking out on the streets. The other day, someone clipped my car, because those are narrow areas around there. So the more cars you have coming through, the more there's a likelihood of that type of thing. So that's my wife and my biggest concern is, the parking issue. We have had an eye on that school, the one we're talking about today, for a long time. We love that architectural design, and it is kind of odd to have all the old with that commercial 50s newer look. But, we have noticed constantly the disrepair. You can tell that people go in and out of there, vagrant people probably at different times. And so we're really concerned that something be done with the facility that would get rid of all of those problems. I have looked at that back area, and there's a lot of land back behind that facility. And so I think my desire would be the possibility of adding additional parking spaces back there. And I know they did that modification with Garland Roads to have more, and I'm just wondering if that's a possibility, that there's a way that might happen. Anna, the lady who presented, was kind enough to invite people to come and meet with her and talk to her, and she would show us plans and things. My wife had just had open heart surgery, and so I've been totally preoccupied with, helping her, and just really couldn't tear myself away to do that. But I appreciate her willingness to allow us to, get with her if we wanted to and see the plans and hear what she plans to do. And I listened very carefully to everything that was shared, and I'm impressed, with what they're trying to do. So while I want to see this facility, fixed up, and I want to see that improvement in our neighborhood, again, my only real concern is the parking issue. Now, coming over here, and I've noticed this before, driving along that street, there's a long stretch. There's some houses that have quite a lot of property right on Rivermont that usually don't have anybody parked on those long stretches. And so my anticipation is that if people have two cars, they're going to end up on those longer stretches there on Rivermont. So anyway, am I making my point, or am I confusing you? You're nodding your head,
Nod your head to both. No, you're making a point, and you reached your time with it, so we're good. If you can
Okay.
state your name for the...
I'm Harold Wheeler at 2236 Rivermont Avenue.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else in favor of this petition who would like to speak? All right. As we go over to folks opposed, if there's a group such as a homeowners association representing a bunch of individuals, we would like to invite them to go first. So groups are opposed, or individuals opposed, and I think we have a gentleman in the back who we'll call him back up. Does he graciously? If we'll do that, we'll wait till we're done with the public session, and we may ask for that for both pro and against. So yes, sir. If you could repeat your name again and sign in.
Carl Manfield. Before I left home, I told my wife I had to wear a coat and tie to make a good first impression, which I immediately blew.
We took your advice last time about being on the right track.
Understand. I've lived most of my life in Lynchburg, the past 35 years at 2101 Rivermont, which we're the second house down from this property. We do have significant concerns about it. I do appreciate, we as a neighborhood, I'm sure, appreciate the concern for historic character. Depending on your source, Rivermont was either the first or second planned subdivision in the country, and that's something that should be protected in the city. I also know from experience that restoration is much more expensive than renovation. When we bought our house, it had been what I described, no offense to Ms. Marion, as bastardized. We tore out lots of 4x8 sheets of cheap paneling to restore it to its original construction. I want to stress that our opposition has nothing to do with who the tenants may be. This neighborhood has been one of the most heterogeneous neighborhoods in the city. We have people in their 80s, we have college students and everything in between. We have black residents, white residents, Oriental. We've had professionals, 2 physicians, a Commonwealth attorney whose house is going to be open real soon for the Garden Day, and we've had nurses and maintenance personnel. We've had across the board a mixture in the neighborhood. We understand that there could be room back there to put in 22 parking spaces. Most households have at least 2 people living in them, 2 drivers. That quickly becomes 44 parking spaces. And people often have visitors. That adds to it still yet. Hall Street is a very narrow street. If people park on that street, cars meeting each other would have a difficult time. It's one of the crossover streets between Rivermont and Bedford Avenue. The Bedford Avenue end has 2 high walls, not walls, or banks on each side, so it's a very difficult street to exit onto Bedford. You have to ease up very carefully and look both ways because you don't see cars until they're very close. And as far as a pass-through or traffic going out, that would increase a safety problem from our concern. The Garland Roads School is going to put considerably more people there. We also appreciate what they're doing. But when we look at the 2200 block, where a house there was not too long ago converted to multiple apartments, parking became a significant item. We are up a full block. When we moved there, almost never was anyone parked in front of my house. Now almost always someone is. And we're the next block right up from these houses. That can be a significant problem. The city rightfully created bicycle lanes. That made traffic a little more crowded through there also just a few years ago. We ask you to protect the street. I know the current owners were not responsible for some tenants who were there summer before last, but they were anything but good neighbors. They had lawn parties, drinking parties, lots of laughing late into the night in the summer months. That should be avoided at all cost. I was the president of the Neighborhood Watch for about 10 years, and when the School of the Arts wanted to convert an apartment building into a dorm, our neighborhood spoke in favor of it. But those high school students did not have cars. They were very, very good neighbors, and we were very sorry to see that our school go away. But for the sake of those of us who put heart and soul for decades into this community, we ask you not to approve this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, can you leave this sign-up sheet?
Oh, sorry. That's a second one.
You're fine.
That's all right. Others opposed, like to come forward.
My name is Ken West. I'm a retired professor from Lynchburg College after 40 years. Congratulations. Good luck in Richmond. I'm not opposed to, as Chairman Peralta said, having these buildings renovated and revised. I'm just opposed greatly to this plan. When Patty and I arrived here in 1976, my grandmother lived on Rivermont, so I knew it well, but the person who was our realtor didn't know that. And we asked her to show us around because we were trying to decide whether to move to Lynchburg. And this is what she said: "I will not show you a single house below Garland Roads Elementary School because the place is totally deteriorated. What you have there is apartment houses and you have duplexes. This is not where you want to raise children. This is not a place for children to be raised." And I think the historic district designation, we finally found a house at the bottom of Huron Avenue, right across from Hall's, and we moved in despite the warnings of our agent. I think the historic designation to Rivermont was the best thing that ever happened to it, because you begin to see changes made. And this is a historic area. Right on, if you drive to Huron Avenue and you notice the house on the very corner on the right, that's where the Appersons lived. And Mr. Apperson, you may recall, was one of the founders of the Academy, but he also was responsible for the trolley coming up Rivermont Avenue. And it actually, according to Jim Elson's book, it actually took a turn into his house so he could get out on the steps there and leave. And he built two houses right behind him for his two sisters, and he built a hunting lodge where there were no other houses anywhere, a hunting lodge at the end of the street that my wife Patty and I now live in. And so this has been a tremendously important historic area. I think one of the most courageous stances I saw, and it caused a lot of trouble in the community, was when a Lynchburg family bought a house in the historic district, and they built, I think, a fence that did not match the code of a historic area. And the commission actually turned them down and made them take it down to match code. And it has kept it so family friendly. Now those people had really angry signs for a long time in their yard. I think now that Alice, I would love to see her do something with that, but not 22 units, not possibly 44 cars. I really invite any of you in the morning to come with me and sit on the corner of Huron and Rivermont when the school buses are coming down and people are trying to go to work. I want you to come sit with me and see how long it takes you to turn left. And then I want you to come back when the school buses and all are leaving and all the people are coming from town, and how long it takes you again to get onto Rivermont and to turn left. And now we're going to add 44 cars in this very small area, and I think it's going to be a traffic hazard. My great fear is when I'm gone in 10 years from now and a grandchild comes and has a realtor, someone will say to him, I'm not going to show you anything on Rivermont because it's become Little Ward's Road. Little Ward's Road, and the traffic is horrible, and it's really not meant for families to raise children. So, and I wish you luck. I just wish you changed the plan to something that really would fit into our community well. Your plan does not.
Thank you. Others opposed. And just a reminder, we are dealing with 3-minute time intervals, so we want to give everyone the opportunity to talk, and we do have that time running up to your left.
Hello, I'm Sandra Luce, and I live first house in on Huron, one of the houses he mentioned that was built by Apperson for a daughter. From the side of my house, I can see another high-density housing project on Rivermont. I can hear it. I hear cuss words. I hear fights. I see police. And I'd be very concerned that a high-density unit on the other end of the block, which I can also see from my house diagonally, would do the same. So I think that lends support to what Ken was saying about a place for children. The one gentleman talked about he'd like it to be a safe place for his kids, but I think when you get 22 mainly one-bedroom apartments, you're not creating a safe family area. And we have been able to attract families to Huron and to Rivermont, and I've been so pleased about that. We've been able to attract people with children because they see it as being a safe, good community to raise families, and they've put investment in their properties. We've had people move in from other states. I think that this project will change the whole characterization of our community, and it won't be that good family place. So just to say there were 10 children on one block. Across the street are 4 children. Diagonally across the street, 4 grandchildren spend much time. So it really is a family children place, not a place of a lot of single people and apartments. And I think that we know, that would change the nature. So when I hear that it's compatible with the neighborhood, we don't have, from the Greenbrier down, we don't have anything like this high-density housing. And I feel it would start to be a detriment to Rivermont and that sort of thing would creep. I think that this is a good project. I don't think it's a good place for it. The other thing that I just want to speak to very briefly that I think is highly ironic, the person who owned the house, and it was said that it wasn't well taken care of and there was some vagrants in it. It was the person, my understanding was the person who's developing the Garland Road School. So he owned the house, and living in the house were people that worked for him. So it's ironic that, this is a developer that we welcomed to town, but now we're saying that he hadn't taken care of the property, but he was the owner of the property. I don't think that it is impossible to say that it could go back to being a residential. I think, if the starting price was right, it could be. But you have to buy it in a way that you can afford to put a lot of money in it. It has been run down, but it has been run down by developers. So it doesn't lend me to trust another developer, because it was the man who did the Piedmont apartments and owns the Garland Road School who had owned the house up until December. And he was the one allowing the problems. So we also had experience with other singles who lived in the home, and that was the ones that with the parties. So I just think it's really changing the nature of Rivermont Avenue. I'm very concerned, and I ask you to be concerned.
Thank you. Yeah, we need to put a lanyard on it.
So I'm Mike McElroy. I live across the street from this property, and I would love to see it, an owner who would take care of it. It is, in my opinion, needs someone to revitalize it, but I believe that putting 22 properties, 22 units into this property is the wrong plan for this property. I think that as some of my other neighbors have expressed concern about, the traffic is something that I'm very concerned about. I commute to work every day. It's already hard enough to get out onto Rivermont, and now I'm going to be fighting with another at least 22 cars. And the parking is another big concern, especially in front of my house, across the street from my house, having cars parked all over the place in there, and even down onto the Huron Street. I believe that they're going to be parking there as well and crossing that street. I don't want to go into too much detail about the traffic and the parking, because I think that's been covered already, and I also have concerns about the historical preservation of the inside. But what I really want to focus on is on the noise. Now, we had a tenant in there probably about a year ago from the previous owners that it had been rented to these kids, and they called themselves the Keep Colony. And they came in and they had, I was actually excited to see somebody living there for a while, but then it turned into a bunch of parties on Friday and Saturday night. The noise was just absolutely terrible. I have 4 kids. They were complaining about it. They couldn't get to sleep. And I'm worried that that's going to happen again. We're just going to change this over to R4. And despite the intentions of what the current owner has, once you switch it over to an R4 zone, then the next owner can do what they want with it, with an R4. It doesn't matter what if she's taken it so far and maybe she runs out of money, has to sell it, or she gets it all the way to where she's renting it and someone else comes in and wants to do something slightly different with that. It could deteriorate from there, and then the neighborhood goes south, and you start getting noise problems, you start getting crime problems, you get everything else. The crime is another concern I have, in not necessarily the people that are living there are going to be more apt to commit crimes or not, but just that when you put more people into an area, the average statistics show that you're going to get more crime in that area. So you're putting a high-density resident right next to another area that already has some issues with crime down the street, and you have quite a bit of R4 already designated on Rivermont. I don't believe the community needs another R4 in that area. I don't think they need another high-density apartment complex in that area as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, good afternoon. Veronica Miner and Deirdre Saunders. We are longtime residents of Lynchburg, Virginia. However, we are out of town at this time. We were notified of this expansion, this 22-unit. We live at 302 Loudoun Street. We are the property adjacent. We abut to the school. We have historical understanding because we grew up here, so we know it was first the Sims home, and then it became Seven Hills Academy. So we are familiar with the historical preservation. We're not exactly totally upset about this project. We agree with what's been said. It's a nice piece of property. It's always been beautiful. But there are certain aspects of the plan that does need to be noted from our point of view. You've heard from the others, from the street of Rivermont. Now we're going to talk about Loudoun Street. So that brings in a new perspective. The proposed parking lot you've heard is not enough. All you have to do is drive back there and you'll see. They're correct. 44 units, 44 parking spaces plus will be needed. The type of arrangement of the housing that's expected to be offers very little privacy for the persons in 302 Loudoun Street. We have no privacy. Currently, there's a gymnasium that sits away from the school site, and it abuts right up about 8 feet from our property line, 6 to 8 feet. What we are requesting, if this should ever go through, is that a barrier of a more permanent nature will be erected. My sister, who is a civil engineer, and myself, who's an administrator, will give you details of what we would like to see done. And most likely, in all respect to trash, noise, traffic, the dumpster, one dumpster for 22 units, the enclosed piece shows that it may be more than one dumpster, but the trash that's come into our backyard has been deplorable. Our mother lived to 100 years old. She lived 96 years in this area, at that home. Home was built in 41. So we did not cause a lot of disturbance to Seven Hills Academy because she lived alone. But we come home and we like to have R&R at our home. That is our home place. The trash, from the dumpsters, from the kids, the beer cans, name it, the parties. You've heard it all. So I don't want to reiterate. But I want to make it very clear. This is a good project in some respects. It has drawbacks. And I think that if you look at possibly, rather than 22 units, lower it and demolish the gymnasium. That's a true eyesore. That is scheduled to be the lofts. If you're going to increase parking lots, it should be expanded with what you have, and also consider the plot of land, or the plat of land that's next to the school, going to the north, going to the south of the house. So with that, I'll then turn it over to my sister, Deirdre.
I think we're out of time.
I might suggest if you just want to sign in as a separate person, we can restart the clock for you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. My sister's pretty much established exactly what we wanted to talk about, a more permanent barrier or something that gives us more privacy.
Excuse me, just slide the mic over just so that's clear on the record. Thank you.
My name is Deidre Saunders. We are property owners at 302 Loudoun Street. Our property abuts this proposed development from the rear. There's an existing 6-foot fence there now, the rear of our property. The point we're trying to make is we've always had problems with Seven Hills School, and when it was Virginia School of the Arts. Intrusion of property, people hanging out in the area. With an elderly parent there, we were very conscious that we needed to keep a watch on that. This proposal, as a high-density neighborhood, is concerning. I understand the economics of driving it to as much occupancy as possible, but as it was stated earlier, to keep the historical nature of the neighborhood in a fashion that is really conducive to family development, we would like to see something less than the 22 opposed. We are asking that something, if the proposal would go through, that we'd have some type of more permanent barrier along our fence line, starting at 302 Loudoun Street, extending south per the plan. Right now, it's proposed for medium, low, and high evergreen shrubs in a diagonal pattern. I don't see that on the plan that I have, but the one that I had showed that. That would only be an evergreen buffer, not sufficient for noise, and would definitely not discourage anyone to discard trash if the dumpsters were full, or not even just that, just for privacy, just to have privacy. So we would be interested in a relook at this development to be more accommodating to neighbors on Loudoun Street, which we are one of.
The other point that is on the diagram.
You're done.
Yeah,
Did
ma'am,
I say-
you're fine. You've already exceeded your time.
Yeah,
so.
she can.
Right.
I think this barrier, that's open space.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, great.
She's
Thank
fine.
you.
I'm fine with what I
Thank
said.
you.
Thank you very much.
Others opposed who would like to come up next? Yes, sir.
My name is Stephen Chester. I'm the owner that lives directly across from this property at 2024 Rivermont. I'm an ER physician here in town, and I can tell you that the high-density population down in Rivermont on some Saturday nights is very active by shootings and other activities that the town precludes in this particular time in our opioid crisis. I can tell you that the two men in here, Bob Luce and Claybrook Dean, it took me 6 months to find those two individuals to start doing the restoration work on my house. So I've spent almost every day off of shift working in my loft, rebuilding windows on my house myself. Now that's ownership. That's ownership of cutting the weeds back from the curb that hasn't been seen since 1950 and seeing the iron edge on the sidewalk that's there that you'd never seen before. So I take great pride in what I've done at that house. The upkeep, the slate, the curved glass, I drive 5 hours to drop off frames to get the glass put back in, to bring them back, to turn around and drive 5 hours to get another set done. That ownership is not what we're going to see out of 22 units. I did my undergrad at the University of Colorado. I went to medical school in California. I did my residency training at Cook County in Chicago. 51st Martin Luther King. Those are all excellent institutions. What I'm saying is coming from that and saying that being in high-density housing doesn't affect your home, the price of your home, the resale value of your home, I disagree with vehemently. I like the fact that we had the opportunity to have someone come in and introduce themselves. We bought this property, we want to improve it. Bobby and I were like, oh, there's finally going to be some help. And it just is not what we need at the end or the beginning of Rivermont, however you look at it. If you look at what the home multi-family structures are doing down in Rivermont, you'll see that cannot produce better property values than what we've got going right now. They're vacant, they're for sale, they're in disrepair. I live right next door to one that's for 3 years is falling apart, but nobody does anything about. I can't support the plan. I love the fact that we have an owner and there's a possibility, but not for what we've got planned. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Others opposed would like to come forward. Yes. And Tom or Lauren, would you mind sliding up a page for the map? We're hearing a lot of addresses. Yeah. Any of those that provide addresses, just so. Perfect. Thank you. Let's go ahead.
My name is Patty West, and my husband and I live on Huron Avenue, and I am here just to get you to focus on some of the numbers, because I don't think we've been completely sure about exactly how this is going to affect us, but I'm hoping that by going over these numbers with you, you're going to see a little bit more of why we're concerned about particularly the parking and the cars that are going to be in this new apartment. In number 8, we talked about there are going to be 22 spaces available for parking. And we've already said there are going to be 22 units. That if they have one bedroom, that's possibly 2 adults, 2 students, 2 people who drive. That's going to be, with that 44 possible cars that if they only have one bedroom, but we've already established that there are more, some of them are going to have one bedroom, some of them are going to have 2 bedrooms. Now, taken to the extreme, if all of them were 2 bedrooms, we're talking about 88 cars that are going to have to be put somewhere. They can't be put on Hawes Street because that street is just simply too small for even 2 cars to be passing. They have to slow down. They're going to have 22 places for parking in the facility, 8 on the street. Where are the rest of them going to go? They're going to go some on Rivermont, some in front of the McElroy's house, some in front of the ER doctor's house. The rest of them are going to go down Huron and Riverview Street. Now, I would just want to give you a comparison, and that, as I counted today, there are 24 adults who have cars or who can drive on Huron. There are 24 adults on Riverview who have cars or can have cars and can drive. There are as many people on those 2 streets that can be drivers or can have cars or may have cars as will be in that one facility. Or maybe there will be even more in that facility than on the 2 streets where we all live, and that's why we're concerned. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed who would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Bob Luce, and I happen to be a builder, Class A contractor here in Lynchburg. I live on Huron in the Stone Craftsman House. And just a few comments. 4 or 5 years ago, Charlie Hurt and I went through that property we're talking about. And we were looking at that, doing an assessment, trying to figure out if we could, my wife at the time was working for New Vista Schools, and they were thinking about relocating. We went through that property, and, really it is an extremely interesting property. We like to do restoration, and, it just lends itself well to that. I have a hard time understanding, though, how it's going to maintain that flavor with 22 apartments in it. And that's just my own personal opinion. We'd love to see something happen to that house because I look at it every day of the week. Now, I drive a Ford F-250. It's a rather large truck. The other day I was coming back. I usually come back up Bedford, and I make the turn, and I was coming up that side street, Hawes, and I got the stop sign, and some woman in a rather small car, honestly, I had to get off of the road so she could pass me. There's not enough room on that road for a lot of traffic. It has no sidewalks. We have children in the neighborhood. The traffic is a big concern. But it also, I think about how you're going to fit 22 apartments into that space and do it and maintain the historic integrity of that house. The other thing I want to comment on is that zoning is there and it really protects the people who inhabit that part of the community. It's zoned R3, and it's zoned that way for a reason. And the reason we're all here is to contemplate changing that. In my opinion, I think it would be a detriment to that community if we change that. It's zoned R3 for a reason. Let's don't change it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Scott Ling. I live at 200 Huron, one of the sister houses that Mr. Apperson built. I can see the subject property from my house, and I just wonder, in R3, they're allowed 10.89, however they came up with that figure, units. So what's wrong with just going with 11 units instead of 22 units and making them up class instead of 22 marginal? Anna talked about what she was going to do inside briefly, and we don't know the size of the apartments that she's talking about. We don't know whether it's going to be, upscale, whether it's going to be Section 8, what her game plan is here. And I just think that the R3, we wouldn't be here right now if she was going to go with the 11. or 10.89, as it says in the zoning book. I think we would all go along with that and agree that that would be a good use for that property, because we've seen it go up and down. I'm just wondering if that could be a possibility for her to review her plan and to do 11 instead of 22. You know, enough has been said about the traffic situation and the limited parking that's there. And sure enough, there's going to be people parking on Huron that will just walk across the street, park their cars, and then walk into wherever their loft apartments are or what have you. So that's basically what I've got to say. I'd like for you to reconsider because you've already approved it basically from what I read, but to reconsider your vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, Planning Division has recommended approval, and then we either recommend or don't make or recommend for or against the City Council. So they'll be the ones who make the final decision.
This panel right here doesn't make a
We just
recommendation
make a recommendation
at all?
to council.
Okay.
Yeah, but we haven't voted on this.
We have not decided yet.
The documents, it's all within recommendation from the planning state.
Yep. So there's
Okay.
3 steps involved, just to clarify that.
All right.
Great, thank you.
And just one other thing, I think they ought to do a traffic study. I think I read somewhere where they weren't going to do one or didn't feel it was necessary. But when you look at Hollis Street, it's very narrow.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Marcia McBratney, and my husband Billy and I live at the end of Riverview Place, that is a street that comes off of Huron Avenue. We've worked very hard to restore a 1911 house, and we love our view and we love the quietness of the area. I think our concern is that with 22 renters, obviously renters are not going to be taking care of their properties as well as homeowners or owners, even if they were condominiums. And I think that's our concern, in that a new owner, and I did not go to a meeting that she had, so she may have addressed this and I'm just not aware. She is not an in-town owner. I don't know if there'll be a management company that will take care of this, but we would be very concerned about 22 renters who may or may not take care of the property. If she has owned this since December, we would have hoped that perhaps the trash that's still in the yards and some of the overflowing trash bins might have been picked up just as a sort of a good gesture to the neighborhood. The property is still in terrible disrepair, and I can certainly understand why she might not want to spend time or energy until all of this is approved. But we're very concerned about having renters in that area as opposed to property owners, which condominiums or fewer units would encourage.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Come on forward, please. Up. Come on in. We'll get you next.
Okay. My name is Alec Donnell. I live at 2315 Rosemont Avenue. I've been there for 34 years. The house I live in was purchased by my grandfather in 1917, and my uncle lived there after that, and then I'm living there now. So over 100 years, my family's been in this house. I came back and took it over when my aunt died, and I came with the idea that this is a place to build some community. What did I do? I met my neighbors. I was retired at the time for a couple of years. We put up a fence all the way across the back because Early Learning Center and Miriam's house is behind us. At that time, it was a car dealership. But, zoning, R3, we're R3. There were, in the house next to us, there were 3 apartments. The house we moved into, when I bought the house, there were 3 apartments. Down the street, the house had 5 apartments. Today, the house next to me, single owner. My house, single owner. The house that had 5 apartments, people moved out, they bought it. People live in the basement and rent an apartment. People rent it upstairs, the rest of the house. So, you know, when I hear the talk about R3 or R4, there's a case to make for having R3. And the case is, you've got an opportunity to build community and also not overcrowd. And, certainly I want something done with 2001 Rivermont. My mother and father were married at 2001 Rivermont, 1928. Well, her sister owned it, and they had pink poinsettias coming down the stairways as my mother walked down to be married. I know that because one of her sisters told me. But, you guys have a tough job, and I don't envy your job. But, the lady that's got her plan for fixing the house up, I hope she'll do it. But let's reconsider going to R4. R3 is not a bad deal. I hope you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Sir, you can come on up. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, my name is John Carey. I live at 35 here on a block down from the property in question. I visited Lynchburg on a whim a couple years ago. I was here for less than 48 hours, fell in love with this neighborhood, fell in love with the house. A month and a half later, my family moved across the country. So I think I'm probably uniquely qualified to talk about the neighborhood and the draw of it. And I'm also probably uniquely qualified to talk about traffic, because I've seen the worst of it on a day-to-day basis for a long, long time. It's a big reason why I moved here. I commend Anna for trying to put something together to do something cool with this property. I looked at the same thing myself and kept asking myself, what would be cool, what would benefit this community, what would benefit this neighborhood, what would improve it. I think all of us have probably thought that. What could we do something special with this building to make this neighborhood better? I think you could rephrase everyone else's points, but the bottom line is there is no way you can put 22 units in this building and not have it be detrimental to this neighborhood in terms of the quality of life for our families, the safety of our children, the quality of life in terms of traffic, getting out of that street, getting up and down that street. I work from home. I walk up and down Rivermont every day, and I can tell you, it gets depressing seeing the trash piles on the sidewalk, seeing the litter everywhere, and to kind of reiterate what a lot of people have already said, the pride of ownership in your home. People just treat things they own differently than if they're there for a short time. They're not vested in it. They're not vested in the neighborhood, the community. They're just a different level of appreciation, and I think inherently human nature, people treat things differently when they are renting them versus when they own them. There is nothing you can do to change human nature, but if you open this up to R4 and put 22 apartment units in that building, it's going to be a detriment to this neighborhood. There's no question. At the very, very, very basic bottom level considerations, stoplights, crosswalks, lighted, notices, something for people when they're getting in and out of there. There needs to be all kinds of traffic study goes into this before anyone opens up the green light on it, in my opinion. So I would encourage you to be very, very careful about approving this. I think it would be a detriment to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Others opposed?
My name is Bonnie Borsham. And I live on Memphis Avenue, which is between Quinlan and Columbia, which is the block next to the Garland Road School. And recently, it was approved to rezone the Garland Road School. And that is also going to, when that's completed, they're putting 29 units into that building. So you have a potential of another 30 to 60 cars there. And that, I don't think the parking was ever really totally thoroughly resolved. I know they did do some shifting around and added some more parking places. But with an additional of another apartment building on Rivermont Avenue of another 22 cars, you're looking at over 100 cars on Rivermont, which not only affects my area or the Seven Hills School area, it affects all of Rivermont Avenue. I don't know if any of you live in the area, but if you come up and down Rivermont Avenue at certain times of the day, it's bumper-to-bumper traffic now, just in the last 6 or 7 years. I have friends up on Oakwood Court that oftentimes to get out of there to make a right or a left turn, they have to go in the opposite direction and find a place to turn around to go in the opposite direction. So this is not just locally in that one spot or the Garland Road spot. This is the quality of life on all of Rivermont Avenue, which is your historic district in Lynchburg, and it's the most beautiful area in Lynchburg. And to keep adding more apartments, as I've heard, I agree with everything that has been said about that. I'm an historic preservationist at heart. I've lived in Bedford, and I was very active with the Bedford Historical Society and their preservation. And I'm very much into the adaptive reuse of our historic buildings because oftentimes we have to do that. But I don't think that it's a good match for this particular building. And I don't know how valuable the 1950s addition is on the building. It doesn't look like it's worth a whole lot to me, but I would frankly like to see a building like that restored back to a residence, of a home. The one right across my backyard fronts Rivermont, and when I'm standing in my backyard, I'm looking at the building where Compliments was, and then Riverside Runners was, and that has been converted back into a single-family home. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that the larger effect on Rivermont Avenue and the people that live on those streets that have to come out onto Rivermont to go anywhere. I can come back around the college and come up there on the corner where the corner restaurant is. It's a traffic light to get on to Rivermont if I can't get out of Quinlan or Columbia, which at times I can't, and I have to do that. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll sign my name when I'm done. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Brandt, and with my wife, we live along Rivermont at 2021. We actually share a common property line with Anna. I actually debated a long time before coming to speak at this hearing. I've spoken to some of my neighbors. Actually, I'm being introduced to some of ones that I haven't met yet here today. But I've also spoken to realtors, real estate attorneys, all who offered some pretty discouraging advice as far as participating in this process. But most concerning to Nancy and I was that we didn't want to be seen as NIMBYs or worse. When we bought our house, we didn't knock on doors to see who our neighbors were. But we did check to see what the zoning was for the property next door. We relied on the neighborhood zoning as we made plans to further restore our house. And as you've heard from some of the other commenters, we're on the cusp of being the reversal of the trend of restoration of homes along Rivermont, because our project to restore our property is now on hold. And interestingly enough, Aileen, who spoke here earlier, we got connected through Anna, but she provided a photograph of the house that shows some of the missing details. But that project is on hold because of the questions that we have about the proposal next to us. When we moved in, we imagined that someone else could restore the property, either as a single-family home, as the previous commenter made, or adaptively reused for a small number of condos or apartments, in keeping with many of the other homes along Rivermont and in the R3 zoning. Now, we've met with Anna to hear her proposal, and she's certainly a nice person, and we clearly wish her no ill will. We're happy to see things happening that restore buildings along Rivermont. And she paints a pleasant enough picture of her proposed real estate investment. You know, totally repairing the house and the school, the landscaping of the grounds, qualifying for historic tax credits, attracting doctors and others who can afford high-end rents, you know, all the things that maybe we'd love to see. And maybe that's what happens, but maybe not. You know, by her own admission, the numbers for her investment are somewhat fragile, and she might need to create more units than the 22 she's currently proposing. And in R4, with the size of this lot, you could certainly put a lot more units on it than the current 22 that's being proposed. And the rezoning doesn't really constrain you know, an owner for other kinds of things. So as a neighbor who shares a property line, we're deeply concerned about mixing high-density traffic and parking with our children, and we have 3 of our children and 1 grandchild living with us. They're playing and walking to the park. We're concerned about the increase in noise and from traffic and the hum of dozens of either air conditioners or heat pumps that are literally within mere feet of our house. We're also particularly concerned about exterior lighting that will likely spill over into our windows, into our outdoor spaces. We moved to Lynchburg last fall, and we don't have the years-long perspective that a lot of the other speakers here this afternoon do. But we moved our family here into this community so that not only could we raise our family here, but we could support our oldest daughter and her husband and our granddaughter as they get started with their family. We considered and rejected other houses because they were next to high-density areas. Now, high density is coming to us. More traffic, parking, noise, excess lighting, and decreased property value are all likely.
And sir, we're well past your time limit, but take a moment if you want to just summarize your...
Just 2 more sentences, and they're relatively short.
Okay.
I appreciate
No problem.
your patience. So in the end, it comes down, I believe, to fairness. Is it fair for someone to make a profit at the financial and quality of life expense of their neighbors by changing the rules, or in this case, changing the zoning, especially when it's an investment property and not a personal residence? So I appreciate the opportunity to comment this afternoon, and you know, in spite of this, I feel very welcomed into the Lynchburg community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed? Yes, sir.
My name is John Wills. I live at 196 Huron Avenue. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the council. I think we're at a really critical point here. I mean, I think we all agree that we'd like to see something happen to the property, something positive. But I think if we start down a path with 22 units, rezoning it, the damage will be very difficult to reverse. I think I implore everyone to carefully consider this and the repercussions it will have on the residents, and just want everyone to carefully consider the outcome and the possible dangers of heading down a path like this. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else opposed? All right, well, Ms. Chitla, as petitioner, you have the opportunity to offer a response at this time to their concerns. There is a 3-minute time limit, but if you are addressing what has been many concerns specifically, we have some leniency with that.
That sounds good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the comments and hearing everyone's views. It's clear that everyone in this room really cares deeply about the neighborhood, and that's very heartening. At the same time, I feel terribly deflated because I'm very excited about this project, and I thought that this meeting was going to go more smoothly. I've heard a lot of very positive comments from neighbors who did not come today, and I think those are the ones who emailed me, who've called me, and I did not hear some of the negative reactions. So I have to say I'm a bit unprepared for this. But at the same time, let me respond to some of the questions. I think they're very good and valid concerns that have been expressed. So I try to group some of the issues raised. I think the primary one is this is too many units. Can you do something different, right? Can you stick to 11 or 10? And, you know, when I first looked at this, I thought, why not just restore the beautiful old house and tear everything else down? Economically, that just doesn't work. And it's difficult to convert this into a single residence. You know, how do you live in a house that has a gym and 6 classrooms, right? So the idea that this will be restored to its former glory as a beautiful single-family home on Rivermont Avenue, I don't think that's in the cards. The other option that I looked at is some sort of commercial use. And commercial space in Lynchburg is abundant, and it doesn't rent. So, and I don't think that picture is going to change anytime soon. Plus, having something commercial in a residential neighborhood really didn't make sense either. I thought about doing fewer units and just staying with the R3 zoning, but I couldn't make those numbers work. You know, with 11 units, you know, the property will be negative for many years. You know, I am not a developer. This is my one and probably will be my only project. This is my retirement investment and retirement project. So 11 units is just not going to add up. I can't make those numbers work.
And can I just add one sort of technical point with the R3 zoning? It does allow the 10.89 units per acre, but it doesn't allow multifamily dwelling. It allows a duplex. So really this property would be capped at 2 units on the acre and a half. It's not it's 10.89 per acre, so it'd probably be about 15, 16, but it still is capped at 2 units by the current zoning.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So Casey and I worked very hard together to see how many units do we need in there to make the numbers work. And I have a very elaborate spreadsheet that takes all of my expenses, the tax benefits, and other things into account. And this property will now be making a profit for 7 years. It will be breaking even. So this is not a huge moneymaker. As many of you probably know, historical renovation is very expensive. I will be probably putting about $2.5 to $3 million into this property. And it's hard to make that work. But if you're going to do a good project, have it well done, this is what you need to do. So from my perspective, 22 units is minimum. I can make it work. I don't want to put any more than that because I don't want a complex with lots of choppy, cheap little units. So if this doesn't work out, you know, I'm not that emotionally attached. I'll probably put it back on the market. And maybe someone else will come along and come up with something that I have not been able to do, despite the fact that I really have explored all the options. So, you know, from where I sit, in terms of other uses and lower density, I think the choice here is pretty much having this building sit vacant and deteriorate beyond repair, or doing some sort of an apartment complex that's around 20-some units. That's the only viable thing that I've been able to come up with, and I've consulted widely. So that's one set of questions. The other grouping was the concerns about noise, about, undesirable tenants. Is this going to be upscale? Are you going to bring in Section 8 sort of housing? And on that front, I want to assure you that, I am investing so much in this property because I really like it. I am not going to let it fall into disrepair. It's going to be professionally managed. We're going to have high-quality tenants. These will definitely be upscale apartments. So I have every confidence that the residents will blend very well into the community. Let me just go through to see if I can respond to some of the other questions. On the parking, we, with Bill, we drew that parking lot in every possible way we could. And it was a bit of a trade-off. We wanted to maximize the spaces, but at the same time have a lot of green buffer so the parking lot would not be visible to all the neighbors. So we do have 25 feet along Hawes where we're going to plant a lot of greenery, and I really would like it to be 3-4 feet high so you really can't see the cars. That's probably the best we can do to meet the offsets and really not disturb the neighbors. No one wants to look at a bunch of cars. There are some comments on lighting. Again, we were very careful, agonized over the lights, and selected lighting that sort of beams down, that provides sufficient safety, but doesn't spread out to disturb the neighbors. So I think that should work pretty well. Some questions on how many bedrooms. So there will probably be mostly one-bedroom units. We have 21 bedrooms and two bedrooms. So the population that we are going after is a lot of the hospital community from the 2 hospitals, traveling nurses, doctors that come here for temporary periods, some of the university community. We're not going after students, so I think the tenants will be high-quality people who will take pride in where they live. And I certainly will take pride in maintaining this property to a high standard.
Ma'am, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have a technical question. Sure. I know you said you were going to adhere to the Department of Interior's standards for federal tax credits. And so would it be your intention, I think it's a 5-year period where you have to rent for commercial purposes and then flip those units into ownership mode? Is that what your business plan is?
No, I'm going to rent indefinitely. I plan to keep this building long term.
And I think you've covered most of the main concerns. We'll talk about parking and traffic and other issues, and I think we'll continue to ask you questions as we move forward.
Absolutely.
But thank you for responding to those. So at this point, the public hearing is closed, and as we transition to our discussions, I might suggest that unlike the last petition, we do treat this one as 2 separate requests. One for the future land use map from institutional use to traditional residential, which seems to be pretty straightforward. And then the second request, rezoning the property from R3 to R4. And we can decide on that when we get to the end, but I think it's worth separating those in this case. So with that, I'll open it up to the commissioners for questions for city staff or for the petitioner.
Just so I'm clear, do you want to separate the discussion around those 2 questions?
Well, let's tackle, great point, let's tackle the flume consideration. I mean, right now it's institutional, it's by itself. I don't see the benefit in leaving it as institutional unless someone thinks there's going to be a school there again.
Well, here's one. I hate to be the bump in the road, but in my mind, this is a question that's larger than what we're talking about with this particular space. There are other properties in town that come quickly to mind that are fit in this definition in a heartbeat. And by definition, I mean you've got things that are in such a state that they're going to take a fairly strong influx of cash. So either
they're going to be, an apartment, high-density kind of situation, or they're going to be an institutional use. Now, I say that to say, I'm trying to figure some way to get a handle on this. I don't mean to be a disruption, but if we close this out as an institutional use and then decide that we don't want to let this happen, we've sort of shut the door on what you can do with that property. I just don't see any way. You said mathematically, short of a fairy godmother, I don't see it coming back to a single-family residence. I mean, I can't imagine a lottery winner coming in here and being able to do that. I mean, I don't mean to make light of it. I think that's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I just want to be, like I said, my purpose in saying that is to say, help me understand how to deal with that concern, because that's a question. And secondly, I think we are this isn't the first time we're going to stumble on something like this, so I'm kind of looking for footprints that we can use going forward when it comes up again.
Well, I think that's a good point, and certainly there's nothing wrong with voting for or against both of the items, but I just think treating them as separate votes is important.
My thought was, I'm all for changing the flume from institutional to residential, but I don't know that the petitioner would want us to, if we chose to vote for that change, but against the R3 to R4, the petitioner might withdraw, which is fine too. I mean, it's your prerogative to do that, because you may not want it to change from institutional if you can't get the R4.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing to stop us from voting for that.
It's my understanding it's R3 though. It's not.
It is R3 now.
Right. So it's not a.
No, that's two different things.
Yeah.
Right.
The flume is institutional.
Right.
And she wants to change it.
The flume is a cleanup.
Yeah.
It doesn't. If we change the zoning, then the flume doesn't fit.
If I may.
Yes.
So I might be able to help you, Mr. Bell. So yes, the future land use map does show institutional uses, and in certain areas throughout the city, most likely where there were schools, when the updates were done, they showed institutional. Now, if you look at the traditional residential category, it's for the older areas of the city developed primarily before World War II. Now, if you look at these areas, there's also institutions within there. There's churches, there's still schools. They might not be called out specifically as institution, but they still exist. If you change the future land use to traditional residential, that's not saying that at some point in the future this could not change back to a school or church or whatever. They would just have to come through that process, and as long as it was in scale and in keeping with the older buildings in that area, I think you would be fine in approving that. So I wouldn't get so hung up on the future land use map amendment as I would with the discussion on whether or not the zoning is appropriate. Does that help?
If I could just interject in response to Ms. Marion's comment, it's all or nothing for us. It doesn't make sense for us to go to the city council on the flum piece if the rezoning doesn't work. So we would prefer not to split.
Well, regardless of what we vote on, city council is going to do what they want to do. So you still go to city council and take your chances there. So you should.
I think that, if you guys are comfortable based on what Tom said, I think that helps me a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's move on to the bigger topic, the R3 to R4.
Well, do we want to vote on the flume issue first and get that out of the way?
We certainly could. All right. If someone wants to make a motion.
Make a motion to change the flume to
from institutional.
Institutional to residential.
Second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we've separated that as a standalone part of the petition, and now focusing on the rezoning aspect, going from R3 medium residential to R4 high-density residential.
What struck me, I quickly looked up if the city tax website is correct, the property has 17,697 square feet. Is that correct? And you divide that by 22 units, so you'd have 804 square feet per unit. It's pretty small. The average size of an apartment, which I also looked up, is 934 square feet. And I was thinking 804 is pretty tiny. It would be, that's a 20 by 40 room. And I happen to know of an apartment that's exactly that size, and it has a loft in it, which makes it work a little bit better because you can put a bedroom or a bed up high. And as I understand, you're going to have lofts in the gym area, so I guess you can have 2 levels in part of the apartment. That would not make it such a tiny apartment, but it does make me think you're not going to have a lot of doubles living in small apartments. I mean, obviously, some apartments are going to be smaller than this because, as you said, the ones in the house are going to be larger and nicer, and the ones in the gym are going to be smaller and funkier, probably cooler. I don't know, which all sound pretty good to me. But I do worry about the density. I mean, I'm not so worried about the size of the apartment. I know that size can work, and I'm all for tiny houses and things like that. But I do worry about 22 units. As you say, that is the only number that will work for you.
It really is. And just to add, we are gaining about 3,000 square feet because we're putting lofts in the gym. So it's a little bit over 20,000 square feet. So the average size is over 900 square feet.
But Nancy, if you had more singles, that would help alleviate some of the parking and traffic.
Well, they're almost all single people.
Yes.
You mean not single apartments?
Right.
Because she is going to have 21 bedrooms and two-bedroom apartments.
But she's not going to be able to dictate how many people live in them.
No, but if the market value is...
If they're tiny, I mean, if they're fairly small apartments, I don't think you're going to get a lot of people living in them. So I'm not too worried about additional density. And if you've got 22 parking spaces on the property, right? Then
we are marketing to single young professionals.
So I've talked to some neighbors since I'm a almost direct neighbor, and I've heard a lot of positive things. There's a safety issue, I think. The biggest safety issue, I weigh them on both hands. One is the traffic. There's a misaligned intersection there that actually causes trouble. There are a lot of kids. I have three of the 10 are mine. So, but on the other hand, there was a vagrant living there who broke into our neighbor's house while she was home. And he was living in the back. There's a little building in the back, and so weighing those two things out are tough. I'm really concerned about the future of the property. And the reason I said that about institutional is it doesn't really matter. If it was institutional, it wouldn't matter because she could do probably more what she wanted. It's still, there's going to be this issue of how many units you can have. And, being in construction as well, anybody in construction knows you can't demo that 1950s wing. It costs more than building a small house to demo those. So, I think the traffic has been one I've heard a lot about. The crossing of Rivermont, the lack of a sidewalk on Hawes, because there are kids riding skateboards and sidewalks, and there are kids from all over. It isn't just the 10 on our block. It's the 15 at the next block down at the Greenbrier who come and play, 5 or 6 regularly who come and play. people on Early Street, a lot of homeowners back there, that have the same thing. So I think that, I was hoping I'd look at the plan and see something to do with, walkability along that Hawes Street, and I don't think I saw that. Was there anything, did I miss something on there?
So, we're still looking at the landscaping, and if we exceed the disturbance limits, we will put in a sidewalk. And chances are high that we are going to disturb more. So that would require us to put a sidewalk along Hawes. But I understand that that's sort of a question once we start the construction, right?
Right, that would be something that you all would determine with planning, I'm sure. But I think, some of the questions raised about Hawes Street, a non-standard, no curb, but pretty flat street. So it's really, in that area, it's one of the only flat streets. That is the top of a part of Rivermont where there's only a few flat areas, right? And that's one of them. So there's a lot of bike riding around there. So I think that's some of the concerns I heard were really strongly about that. I know a lot of people complain about density. I did rent an 800 square foot 3-bedroom house when I was younger. So I know that, the size isn't as big of an issue, but the traffic, along that side street where a lot of the parking is there. Now I look on Rivermont and to me, it's there's a lot of space to park. I don't feel like there's going to be an issue with people going across Huron or down Riverside when there's so much space. There's actually an 18-wheeler that parks in front of your school every other week. Big tanker truck. It's always there. I see trucks with lumber parked there. So, I think that's one of the biggest concerns I heard. Other ones were about construction, debris and dust. There's a lot of trash. It blows across the yards on that. So one of the people that was complaining, it came down to really just the safety issue, the cars ingress and egress along Hawes Street, and the trash. And that's really, what I heard a lot of.
The trash during construction or after it's
The
completed?
trash now and the trash during construction, not the trash after completion. One of the neighbors that has lived in really dense areas before, and, that's what she was concerned with. And I asked her, he's like, you think it's going to be, a situation with a lot of trash all the time? She goes, no, I think it's more, I'm worried about the year and a half of construction of debris and things blowing across the yards.
I have a question for Tom, or for the staff. Is there any way, I don't know the zoning well enough to know, but can you build anything close to this in an R3 with a conditional use permit?
No.
No, because you can't.
And you can only have 2 units, or?
Well, the ordinance allows for single-family homes or duplexes. You could probably come in and do something by conditional use permit that is more transient, like a boarding or a rooming house, but not apartments. So if you want to do the apartments, you would have to amend the zoning to R4.
So you're saying you could turn that into a boarding house?
By conditional use permit, yes.
Okay.
And
which is intended for transient.
Right.
So that would be the Airbnb type of concept. And I did look at that. That is a very viable approach. And I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't work out for me. That's the route this is going to take. And that is really transient. That's a whole different ballgame. I think much less desirable.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the traffic, too. I know a lot of these residents have been around long enough to remember when Seven Hills was there, and I just wonder if the traffic of 22 people living there would be worse than the traffic that was there when Seven Hills had I don't know how many kids coming and going twice a day. Yes, ma'am, you.
Yes, I grew up at 302 Loudoun Street when Seven Hills is the Black School. The difference in that traffic
to be someone living there and someone who's going in a 24-hour window versus 12 hours, say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's the difference for the impact. This is continual traffic. That was specific.
Thank you. What it tells me, though, is that this traffic would be dispersed over the day. I mean, there would be people going to work in the morning and coming home at night, I assume. But you wouldn't have, I would imagine there must have been some traffic jams when you had all the parents dropping off their daughters at the same time and picking them all up at the same time, or some of them, I'm sure, walked home. But anyway, I'm just not sure that the traffic would be any worse than had been there.
I have another question about in regards to the property owners on Loudoun, looking at the plan, can you clarify to me what kind of buffer other than trees, or is it only trees and shrubbery? Will there be a fence?
Honestly, still in design, and we're, I don't want to completely speak for Anna, but we're willing to
Right.
talk to neighbors and figure out.
Because I think it's so much a party atmosphere that I would be worried about. But if I live there, I probably wouldn't want that visibility of a parking lot. So the people at right across the street from you, they said, well, we're concerned about how much of the lot we'll see. And so we looked at the plan. We could see there's a buffer of yard and bushes and existing trees that will stay, but for the ladies on Loudoun, that house, there's very, very little space there, and it is really close. Right. So I walk around. I've seen that. I've noticed that, and I didn't know if there had been any thought about that, or.
Absolutely. The trees that are there are, they've been over 60-some years old. They have never been pruned, trimmed, or anything. So they're at a point where they're probably going to be down. What I wanted to add was mature trees to be added when you have your low and high, rather just one border of high mature trees. Personally, due to rodents and vermin with trash, a permanent wall is what I would have added, because with only one dumpster, we see enclosed. However, for 22 units, you need more than one dumpster. As I've driven around to the other apartment, there are 3 or 80-some. We have 1 for 22. That's not acceptable. It needs to be more dumpsters, enclosed, and a permanent barrier. Rodents, vermin, and the trash that they throw, because they don't have anywhere else to throw it after it's full, one, would present another problem.
Just a point to make, a reminder that we've actually closed the public hearing. So we want to get everyone's input, and we are happy to call on folks. But it's also partly to bring you up so you get recorded and heard by the audio-video system. But
Ms. Rogers also brought up the point of trash, which relates. So we've proposed the size of the trash based on the guidelines for 22 units. If that's not sufficient, we'll be happy to make it larger. I mean, we have every interest in keeping this as clean and tidy as possible. And I do appreciate, I'm very sensitive, Ms. Saunders, I don't know which one, wrote to me and about her concerns about the green barrier along that, and we're quite sensitive to it, and we'll be working with the landscape architect to address those issues.
I've got to really commend both sides. Anna, I can't pronounce your your last name correctly, so forgive me. Yeah. So, but and the folks on the other side that have spoken and are opposed, it's really one of the, I guess, most informative public sessions that I can remember in a long time, with good civil dialogue. I like the interchange that we've seen. It's a little bit off schedule, but I like the interchange. You obviously have made an effort to talk to the neighbors. I get the impression the neighbors, they don't hate you. They're not trying to demonize you. They're trying to come in. I think everybody's trying to work for a better neighborhood. And from a public viewpoint, I go up and down that street all the time. I'm worried to death about that Seven Hills building. Just like I am the Jones building. It's, further on down, and there's some other buildings around town. So I think everybody is very concerned about what's going to happen to that building, and just looking at it, I think you're right. I mean, it probably is maybe only 2 or 3 more years away from just not being restorable at all. I guess what is weighing on my vote considerably is that stretch of Rivermont Avenue has made remarkable progress over the years. Mr. Dyram referred to the different houses that have switched from, multifamily to single family and have improved. I think everybody realizes that Seven Hills School is not going to go back to being a single family house. So I don't have that kind of an illusion. But what does concern me is from a density viewpoint that we could actually end up taking a step back in that section of Rivermont Avenue. And we've heard people that have invested there recently, and then we've had people that have been there for a long time. They have relied on the zoning in that neighborhood, and I don't think it's fair to change the rules on them at this point. And with that said, I'm as sympathetic as I possibly can be to you figuring out a way to save that building. And I think you're very sincere and well-intentioned. And if there's some kind of way you can continue to work with the neighbors to get something that could work for you financially, and at the same time allay their concerns about the quality of the neighborhood and the commission's concerns that we continue the forward progress that we have, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So, I'm a very careful investor. I don't like a lot of debt. I don't like partners. This is my project, my finances. So I've been through this with a fine-tooth comb. And I really can't make it work with less than 22 units. So, and I appreciate everyone's position. I certainly appreciate your perspective and the concern of the neighbors. I will probably put it on the market if the zoning doesn't go through, and move on to the next project. There are a lot of interesting properties in Lynchburg.
One comment I would make, because I agree, people buy into an area, and that's what they should expect that to be consistent. And we try and do that as much as we can. In this case, though, even though there are a lot of these houses that are going back to single family, it's still being done under the context of an R3 zoning. So there's no guarantee that it has to stay at that single family. It could still, even under the R3, and in some cases R4, there's room for higher density, looking at the maps. And one thing that stands out to me looking at the map is just a block away, there's a large chunk of R4. And if that wasn't there, I think I would look at this very differently. But there is R4 in this neighborhood. It's not introducing R4 into a purely R3 area. And in fact, I think this would be one of the nicer R4s. That's not a very polite way of putting it, but it would improve the overall picture of this. So I agree with what you're saying, Cham. In this case, I think what we're doing here actually is a step forward in this region, and it's not dramatically changing things as much as some previous zoning petitions we've seen.
I'm not sure whether it's appropriate for me to ask questions, but I was wondering.
Only if someone wants to ask a question, just as a point of order. So if someone wants to allow you to ask a question,
is that okay? Before I bought this, I obviously looked at the zoning and I thought, what are my chances of getting this rezoned? And, I met with the technical review committee. We had an informal meeting, and, all the departments seemed to gave me very good guidance, and I can't say enough good things about them. And I've structured everything to meet all of the city ordinances, all of the guidelines, and then some. And then I also looked at the whole neighborhood. I thought, well, Garland Roads, got their zoning change and there are other developments, I thought, well, my chances are pretty good. And this is going to be a very nice development. This is not going to be the Greenbrier or others. So I was pretty positive that this was going to go through, but I see I may have misjudged.
Well, and I don't necessarily think that's the case, and that's what city council's for. I mean, city council routinely will go with a recommendation that the city staff makes that the commission doesn't. So I'm not trying to predict how anything's going to happen, but just realize that there is another step to this process.
Well, and I think one of our biggest goals, regardless of our decision, is to find common ground and help both sides see what's happening and get people on the same page. And I think we've done that a little bit tonight.
Yeah, it's been a very good conversation.
And that's one of our
Absolutely.
biggest functions as planning commissioners is to address issues and concerns.
That's happened. It's very illustrative as to what's happened with the article that was in the paper this morning about humankind, and I'm sure you followed that process. I didn't vote in favor of the rezoning, but the majority of the commission did after extended discussion and debate, and it was a recommendation from staff and the commission that city council, at least at this point, has not adopted yet. So.
I'm just not sure. I have a very low risk appetite. I like things that are sure bets. So if this commission recommends against, I'm not sure I have the stomach to go to the city council. That's time.
Okay, well, we are going to continue.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you, Dave. Having lived there, the narrative that I seem to hear a lot is really that this is going to attract violent and dangerous people because that is what's at the Greenbrier. Number one, that isn't true as it is. I live 2 doors from the Greenbrier and I pull out by the Greenbrier. My biggest concern, and the people that I've talked to, when I talk to them about that, it just comes down to traffic. But on the other hand, I really think the value of the building to the community is strong. I think that's a really important thing to me. I don't want to see a building like that sit vacant. And I think it is a sustainable, it actually lends itself to sustainability. Number one, density is not a bad thing. Slowing speed down on roads is not a bad thing either. If I could advocate for 25 mile per hour, that's what I would do, or a median in Rivermont. And that's not something to discuss here, but being a stakeholder in the community, I think that's important. I think density lends itself to an interesting fabric, and that's something that we might miss out on no matter what happens. As it is right now, R3, there will not be anything that brings that. There's not going to be a single family there. Just the chances are so slim, as you were saying, Bob. So I tend to lean towards supporting it because I find that people's acceptance of the idea, despite being against it, to me weighs stronger than some of their arguments. I do think there's issues with, as I voted before, there's issues with traffic, but I think that good land use and higher use or better use of a property is always good. So that's why I tend to support it.
Yeah, I'm struggling. Because that's exactly where I am. I don't think there's anything about the project because, let's do it this way. I see our job is more than just finding common ground. We've got to figure out how we're going to get away from all or nothing. And I think there are a lot of things we've put off in Lynchburg and haven't taken care of because it's been an all or nothing kind of thing. There are always going to be parts of any project that are going to make you want to throw up. That being said, it's a great project. Help me with the traffic because and the situation is looking at the property for the 7,500 jillionth time, I can't make this work. Everything goes to Rivermont Avenue. And when you talk about Rivermont Avenue in Lynchburg, you guys are in a better position to call than I have. You've been here longer than I have. But it's not just cars. How many people come down Rivermont Avenue? Bicycles, dog walkers, runners. It's a Lynchburg. Rivermont Avenue is like the biggest fitness area, certainly in our area. this flows into Lynchburg, more civic kind of stuff because the roads aren't big enough. But help me understand how we're going to jump over that. I'm 100% in your camp, Tom, on great use of land, great use of a great property. What are we going to do? How are we going to manage the traffic? Because as somebody said, you're going to have some traffic between the two areas that we've added.
Right, and like I said, I this is a street I drive on daily. I think that being in other communities, I do think it's manageable. It doesn't negate the concerns about safety, but there are going to be concerns either way. There's a guy who rides in our neighborhood with no license plate on his motorcycle constantly, wheelies, everything. No one's there to stop it. We can actually put regulations around it, but that still doesn't change how fast people go in Rivermont. So I think that, I want to express my concern, neighbors' concern about 22 extra cars, but as Nancy was saying, that's spread over a lot of a day, and if you're talking medical professionals, over different shifts as well. So I think that it is a small number. It does add up. There's the other R4 development, but in reality, I think it's just a pittance compared to.
Nancy, I'm waiting for your comment whenever traffic comes up about punishing the most recent developer.
Oh, yeah. I'm not gonna say that on Rivermont. I think Rivermont can handle the traffic. Rivermont can certainly handle the traffic, and as you just said, they're not all coming out at the same time. And if they are medical professionals, it would be great. I mean, it's certainly convenient to the hospital. They would be different shifts. I'll just tell you here's my little list. I heard all the comments, several comments about noise. I think those were comments about some of the past tenants. From what I understood, the most recent batch when you had the School of the Arts kids there, and then since then you've had some kind of groups of kids. And I think when you get a group of kids who know each other living in a house, they're going to have big parties, and you're going to have problems like this. If you have 22 discrete apartments with 22 strangers to start with probably living there, and they only have 804 square feet apiece anyway, you ain't going to have any huge parties in an 804 square foot apartment. You can get 10 people in there. But so I'm not too worried about the noise. I think with the plans that Mrs. Chitla, is that how it's pronounced, has, you're not going to have the kind of noise and trash that have been there before. I think, if anything, it's going to be much better than it was. The traffic, Mrs. West's comment about there only being about 22 people on Riverview and 24 on Riverview and 24 on Huron. That's interesting, but again, I don't want to punish the last person who comes in, and they're not the last people. They're not building a new building. The building is there. Somebody's going to be in it, and I think this sounds like a pretty good plan. The last thing I want to say is I got to have faith in you doing what you say you're going to do. It sounds like these would be very nice apartments, and I know that things are cyclical. You're going to have some very nice apartments. Maybe for the next 20 years they're going to be very nice. Maybe they're going to get seedy after that. I don't know if I'm still going to be alive in 20 years. But, I know I'm going to be seedier in 20 years. But I think things go in cycles. All of Rivermont has gone down. It has come up, and right now it's coming up. I have 2 properties on Rivermont. I'm very much in favor of Rivermont. So I'm just going to say I've got to have faith in you doing what will make this property better, and I will vote in favor of it.
If I could just add. Okay, I will stay quiet.
Any other comments?
Surprise, surprise, I haven't opened my mouth yet.
Getting ready to make up for it?
Yes, even though the hockey game's starting in 40 minutes. I'm not going to talk for 40 minutes. Nor am I going to rush out on this. This has been a wonderful exercise in citizenship for this city. We've had some wonderful comments, pros and cons, and I'm really torn. I grew up in the city. I'm very familiar with Seven Hills School. But the lady spoke to you that went to Villa Maria. Been there, done that too, so I can identify with her. I had a high school sweetheart that lived right down there in Riverview Place. So I'm very familiar with this area, even though I didn't live on it. I lived on Elmwood Avenue, back over there across the railroad tracks, before my family moved on down further west. My concern is traffic, and that is a real concern to me, and parking, because Murphy's Law dictates, man, 22 apartments, we're going to have 44 to 66 people. They're going to figure out how to do it. And I'm just hoping it doesn't happen. I'm hoping that the 30 spaces that you're accounting for is going to work. And I'm really hoping that you're going to put some life back in that building, because that is a beautiful house. It really is. I am concerned about the safety on the street there on Hollis, the going in and out of it. 22 apartments, you know, it bothers me, but you know, I have to think back when I was a newlywed, 800 square foot apartment, been there, done that. And that's my wife and I. Okay, so yeah, you can put 2 people in that apartment. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but they will also generate additional cars. You know, I'm torn which way to go. I really am. But I have to follow with other people's comments. I have to trust that what you're going to be doing, your intent to get your investment back sooner than later, is there, and that the rent is going to be of a nature that, you know, not just anyone, you're not going to have students coming in there. It's not going to be party high. And I lean that we should go ahead and approve it, because I think we need to do something with that area right there. I would like the number of apartments to be smaller, but, you know, the question is, then you pull your tent pegs and move out of town, you know, I'm sorry, or you find someplace else. And if not this, then what comes in there? And how long do we wait for that building to either fall down on itself or someone else come in and put something else in there? And if I had my brothers between professional apartments or a tenement house, I would lean more towards a professional apartment.
I know it's probably not, could I just interject really quickly?
No.
Can you ask a question?
Someone is welcome to ask.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you make your comment quickly?
We can very easily reduce the number of apartments. We can put 2 and 3 bedrooms in there, but that attracts a very different tenant that I don't want. I can probably get close to the same money per square foot, right? Because this is how you calculate it.
Can we ask a question?
If someone wants to call on you. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you, Mark. I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead, ma'am.
$7,000,
Can we,
$350,000.
I could drop some 30 minutes, 35 minutes.
All right. Well, now we're gonna. Excuse me, ma'am. We're gonna keep moving forward. Thank you.
And I'll comment to that. You know, in Charlottesville, this is actually a pretty not dense property. You know, they're packing people in a lot more tightly there than we are here. So, having lived there a long time, I do think that, you know, I know that people in the Greenbrier, they're actually slowly renovating apartments and raising rent in apartments. I know that there's a trend towards this, that people actually are interested in living in more dense areas, particularly younger professionals. So I do think this is a changing trend that some might be uncomfortable with, but I think it's the reality. I think it's the new thing. So we see it downtown, and it's a lot denser downtown.
If I could interject.
No, ma'am. I'm sorry.
There's a total different vibe downtown.
But ma'am, no public input, please, unless you're called upon. Any more questions or discussions? Well, before we do the motion, I do want to remind folks that we are only coming up with a recommendation to council. They make the final decision. Also, our public hearing or our public meeting will continue after this. You are welcome to stay, but if not, I ask that you not talk in this room, but leave quietly as we have more business to conduct. And then finally, as some people have indicated, I appreciate everyone's time and input in the civic conversations that we've had tonight. So I'm going to read the motion, and then I'm going to read the petition, and then someone can offer a motion. So this part of the petition is by Willoughby Properties at 2100 Rivermont Avenue and 211 Hawes Street to rezone the property from R3 medium-density residential district to R4 high-density residential district. Do we have a motion? A second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So 4-2, recommending approval. So thank you very much. Good luck with council. And we are going to move on to our next item. All right, so our next item. We'll give them
Y'all be quieter, please.
You need your gavel.
Just give them a moment to exit. All right, our next item is the discussion, it falls under new and old business, discussion of initiating changes to Section 35.2 zoning ordinance of the City Code of Lynchburg to improve sections of the ordinance related to application time periods and notification of certificates of appropriateness and when they are appealed.
So, members of the Planning Commission, this is actually coming to you by way of the Historic Preservation Commission, and it's covering two items. The first was when the ordinance was rewritten in 2016. At that time, the Historic Preservation Commission was looking for more time between an application was submitted and when it actually came to the commission. The time they requested in 2016 was 30 days. They're now finding that may be a little burdensome on some property owners that are wishing to do renovations to their homes in historic districts. So they are they want to work with staff and come up with a more manageable period, possibly 2 weeks. The second is dealing with notification requirements. Currently, if a petitioner in a historic district appeals a COA denial, or if a group of citizens appeals a COA approval, the only notification is by the legal notice in the paper. There's no signage on the property. The Historic Preservation Commission is requesting to be able to explore the possibility of requiring a notification sign on the property if there is an appeal, just to give people more notice before it goes to council. So what is being requested today is that the Commission consider passing this resolution, initiating an amendment to the zoning ordinance to let staff to go back and work with the Preservation Commission and draft language, amending the Historic Districts Ordinance to cover those two items. One, looking at reducing the 30-day submittal requirement, and two, requiring notification signs if in time of appeal.
What's the notification outreach in the initial process? Is it similar to ours?
No, absolutely not. No. If there is an appeal, the only thing that happens So if the Historic Preservation Commission denies an application, they can request that City Council overturn that, and I believe it's 10 or 15 days. But the only notification, the only way the neighbors know about that appeal is a legal notice that goes in the newspaper. That's it. There's no property owner letter sent, nothing. So and a lot of times people feel like they don't have enough notice.
Do you have what's the definition between major and minor actions? Do you have a strict guidelines to define that?
Well, the ordinance defines major and minor. Minor would be things like painting, replacement in kind. Major are things more like building additions, demolitions, those type of things.
So there is a...
Didn't you used to be on the Historic Preservation?
No, I never was. I've gone before them a few times.
Huh. I think they're looking for members. You can serve on 2 boards.
I'm having too much fun.
You can serve on both, I believe.
Oh, my goodness. You get 2 big salaries for all of them.
Maybe suggest a change in a word. You have 30 days is extensive. Did you mean excessive on the end of the first one? Extensive is kind of a strange word.
Well, that's
It was supposed to be excessive.
that's an Ivy League word.
I had to look it up.
It's not a VCU word. Yeah, we can change it to excessive.
So, Tom, remind us, do we do a formal recommendation, or just say this is a
It would
thing?
A vote would be
Okay.
appropriate, and then if so, we'll bring this back
Great.
for a public hearing, and then we'll go to council.
So we make a motion to accept this as written?
Yep.
I make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Any other items, new or old?
Mr. Good Lord, a round of applause and a...
Yeah, that was good. I thought Tom was punishing you for something when he gave you that one, but you got off pretty
No,
easy.
everybody was like, there's not going to be anyone to come up. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a really quiet one. I saw people in the hallway, and I was like, oh, I know what they're here for.
Now you know. Good job. Yep. Second? All in favor?
All in favor.
All right, thank you all.
Hey, Tom?